Question 1. Regulatory review indicates that Nevada law mandates specific procedures for storing firearms in vehicles. If a concealed firearm permit holder in Nevada must temporarily leave their firearm unattended in their vehicle, what is the most compliant and professionally responsible approach to storage? Option A. Store the firearm unloaded in a locked container within the vehicle. Option B. Place the firearm in the glove compartment without locking it. Option C. Store the firearm in the trunk of the vehicle without a locked container. Option D. Conceal the firearm under a seat or in a bag within the passenger compartment without a locked container. Correct answer is A. Store the firearm unloaded in a locked container within the vehicle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the responsible handling and storage of a firearm, directly impacting public safety and adherence to Nevada law. The core of the challenge lies in balancing personal convenience with the legal and ethical obligations to secure a firearm when it is not under direct control. Failure to do so can have severe legal consequences and endanger others. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves securing the firearm in a locked container when leaving it unattended in a vehicle. This approach directly aligns with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS 202-257, which addresses the unlawful storage of firearms in vehicles. Specifically, NRS 202-257-1 requires that person who has a firearm in a vehicle must store it unloaded and in a locked container. This method ensures that the firearm is inaccessible to unauthorized individuals, preventing potential theft and misuse, and fulfilling the legal mandate for safe storage. Incorrect approaches analysis. Leaving the firearm in the glove compartment without locking it is a regulatory failure because it does not meet the locked container requirement of NRS 202-257-1. While it might be out of immediate sight, it is easily accessible to anyone who can open the glove compartment, thus failing to prevent unauthorized access. Placing the firearm in the trunk of the vehicle without a locked container is also a regulatory failure. The trunk, while separate from the passenger compartment, is not inherently a locked container, as contemplated by the statute if it can be opened without a key or combination. The intent of the law is to create a barrier to access, which a standard trunk may not provide if it can be easily opened. Concealing the firearm under a seat or in a bag within the passenger compartment without a locked container is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This method offers no substantial barrier to access and directly violates the spirit and letter of NRS 202-257-1 by not using a locked container, thereby increasing the risk of theft and unauthorized use. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with this situation should prioritize legal compliance and public safety. The decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant Nevada statutes concerning firearm storage in vehicles, NRS 202-257. 2. Understanding the specific requirements of the law, particularly the locked container stipulation. 3. Evaluating available storage options against these legal requirements. 4. Choosing the option that unequivocally meets the legal standard for safe and secure storage, thereby mitigating legal risk and upholding ethical responsibilities. Question 2. Performance analysis shows that individuals seeking to carry a concealed handgun in Nevada must possess a valid permit. Considering the legal framework of Nevada, which of the following actions best demonstrates responsible and lawful concealed firearm carriage? Option A. Assuming that a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit allows carrying a concealed handgun in any public place, as long as it remains concealed. Option B. Believing that a concealed firearm permit overrides any posted signs restricting firearm possession in specific Nevada locations. Option C. Proactively studying and adhering to all provisions of the Nevada Revised Statutes concerning concealed firearms, including identifying and respecting all statutorily prohibited locations and posted signage. Option D. Relying on advice from friends or online forums to determine where it is permissible to carry a concealed firearm in Nevada. The correct answer is C. Proactively studying and adhering to all provisions of the Nevada Revised Statutes concerning concealed firearms, including identifying and respecting all statutorily prohibited locations and posted signage. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance their right to self-defense with the legal obligations and responsibilities associated with carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada. Misinterpreting or disregarding the specific requirements for carrying a concealed firearm can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of permit privileges. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, concerning concealed firearms. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and strictly adhering to the Nevada Revised Statutes governing concealed firearms. This means recognizing that a valid Nevada Concealed Firearm Permit, CFP, is required to carry a concealed handgun, and that specific locations are off-limits for carrying such weapons, regardless of permit status. The correct approach is to proactively educate oneself on these statutes and to always err on the side of caution by assuming a location is restricted unless explicitly permitted. This approach aligns with the legal framework established by NRS 202, 360, and related statutes, which define prohibited locations and the conditions under which carrying a concealed firearm is lawful. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that possessing a valid Nevada CFP automatically grants permission to carry a concealed handgun in all public places. This fails to acknowledge the statutory restrictions on carrying firearms in specific locations, such as schools, courthouses, and government buildings, as outlined in NRS 202, 360. This assumption demonstrates a lack of understanding of the nuanced legal landscape surrounding concealed carry. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice or personal interpretations of the law rather than consulting the official Nevada Revised Statutes. Laws are precise, and informal advice can be inaccurate or incomplete, leading to unintentional violations. This approach risks misinterpreting the scope of permit privileges and the definition of prohibited areas. A further incorrect approach is to believe that a concealed firearm permit negates the need to be aware of signage indicating restricted areas. Nevada law, as detailed in NRS 202, 360, explicitly states that carrying a concealed firearm is prohibited in certain locations, and the presence of signage serves as a clear indicator of these restrictions. Ignoring such signage demonstrates a disregard for the law and the safety considerations it aims to address. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Nevada carrying a concealed firearm should adopt a proactive and informed approach. This involves 1. Obtaining and maintaining a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. 2. Thoroughly studying and understanding the relevant sections of the Nevada Revised Statutes, particularly NRS 202, 360, which details prohibited locations. 3. Regularly reviewing any updates or changes to these statutes. 4. Exercising caution and erring on the side of restricting carry in ambiguous situations. 5. Always obeying posted signage indicating restricted areas. This systematic process ensures legal compliance and promotes responsible firearm ownership. Question 3. The assessment process reveals that an applicant for a Nevada concealed firearm permit has a past misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace that occurred over 10 years ago. The applicant believes this minor offense is irrelevant and has not disclosed it on their application, assuming it will not be discovered or impact their eligibility. Which of the following approaches best reflects professional judgment and compliance with Nevada law? Option A. Assume that because the misdemeanor conviction was over 10 years ago and considered minor, it does not need to be disclosed as per Nevada Revised Statutes concerning concealed firearm permits. Option B. Disclose the past misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace only if specifically asked about it during an interview, rather than proactively including it on the initial application. Option C. Omit the past misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace from the application, believing that minor offenses from over a decade ago are unlikely to be discovered and are irrelevant to concealed carry eligibility. Option D. Fully disclose the past misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace on the application, providing any requested details to ensure complete transparency with the Nevada Department of Public Safety. Correct answer is D. Fully disclose the past misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace on the application, providing any requested details to ensure complete transparency with the Nevada Department of Public Safety. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for individuals seeking a Nevada concealed firearm permit. understanding the nuances of legal firearm possession and the specific requirements for obtaining and maintaining a permit. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a precise understanding of Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, concerning firearms and the applicant's personal history, demanding careful judgment to ensure compliance and public safety. Misinterpreting these statutes can lead to permit denial, revocation, or even criminal charges. The approach that represents best professional practice involves a thorough and honest disclosure of all relevant information during the application process, including any past legal entanglements, regardless of how minor they may seem. This proactive and transparent approach ensures that the Nevada Department of Public Safety has a complete picture to assess the applicant's eligibility according to NRS Chapter 202. Specifically, NRS 202-305 outlines the criteria for permit issuance, which includes an examination of the applicant's criminal history. By fully disclosing all past incidents, the applicant demonstrates an understanding of and commitment to adhering to Nevada's firearm laws, which is a fundamental ethical and legal obligation. An incorrect approach involves omitting or downplaying past legal issues, such as a minor misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace. On the application, this failure to disclose is a direct violation of the application's sworn statements and NRS 202-305, which requires applicants to provide truthful and complete information. Such an omission can be grounds for immediate permit denial or revocation if discovered. Another incorrect approach is assuming that a past legal issue that was expunged or sealed does not need to be disclosed. While expungement may limit public access to records, it does not necessarily absolve an applicant of the duty to disclose such information to licensing authorities when specifically asked, or when the application requires a comprehensive history. The Nevada Department of Public Safety has the authority to access sealed or expunged records for the purpose of permit applications. A third incorrect approach is relying on informal advice from friends or online forums regarding disclosure requirements, rather than consulting the official application instructions or relevant statutes. This can lead to significant misunderstandings of legal obligations and potentially jeopardize the application. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, completeness, and adherence to the law. This involves carefully reading and understanding all questions on the application, consulting the official Nevada Revised Statutes if any ambiguity exists, and erring on the side of full disclosure when in doubt. Applicants should treat the application process with the seriousness it deserves, recognizing that it is a legal document with significant implications. Question 4. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need to clarify the legal responsibilities of a Nevada resident who possesses a valid concealed firearm permit and is carrying a handgun. Considering the Nevada Revised Statutes, which of the following best describes the lawful manner of carrying a concealed firearm? Option A. Carrying a handgun that is not visible to the ordinary observation of another person, while possessing a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit or meeting the criteria for permitless carry, and being aware of any posted prohibitions. Option B. Carrying a handgun openly in a visible holster, as long as the individual has a concealed firearm permit and is not in a prohibited area. Option C. Carrying a handgun in a holster on one's hip, even if the handgun is partially visible, as long as the individual has a concealed firearm permit. Option D. Carrying a handgun in a backpack or purse that is not on the individual's person, but is readily accessible. The correct answer is A. Carrying a handgun that is not visible to the ordinary observation of another person, while possessing a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit or meeting the criteria for permitless carry, and being aware of any posted prohibitions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a concealed firearm in Nevada. Misinterpreting or disregarding the nuances of Nevada concealed firearm laws can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of permit privileges. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable statutes and regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and adhering to the specific requirements for carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada, as outlined by Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, Chapter 202. This includes ensuring the firearm is not openly displayed and that the individual possesses a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit or meets the criteria for permitless carry where applicable and legally recognized. The correct approach prioritizes legal compliance and responsible firearm handling, ensuring the firearm is carried in a manner that is both concealed and accessible for lawful self-defense, while also being aware of prohibited locations. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that simply having a firearm on one's person, regardless of its visibility or the individual's permit status, is sufficient for legal concealed carry. This fails to acknowledge the statutory definition of concealed and the requirement for a permit or legal exemption. Another incorrect approach is to carry a firearm in a manner that is easily visible, even if the intent is self-defense, as this constitutes open carry, which has different legal requirements and prohibitions in Nevada. A third incorrect approach is to carry a concealed firearm in a location explicitly prohibited by Nevada law, such as a federal courthouse or a school zone, without regard for signage or statutory restrictions, even with a valid permit. These approaches demonstrate a lack of understanding of the specific legal framework governing concealed firearms in Nevada, leading to potential violations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving concealed firearms by first thoroughly familiarizing themselves with the Nevada revised statutes pertaining to firearm possession and concealed carry. This includes understanding permit requirements, definitions of concealed versus open carry, and identifying prohibited locations. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and seek clarification from legal counsel or relevant law enforcement agencies. Responsible firearm ownership and carrying necessitate a commitment to ongoing education and strict adherence to the law. Question 5. Market research demonstrates that many individuals seeking a Nevada concealed firearm permit possess varying levels of understanding regarding the specific locations where carrying a concealed firearm is prohibited by law. Considering Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 202, which of the following best reflects an applicant's understanding of these legal restrictions when faced with a scenario where they wish to carry a concealed firearm into a church? Option A. The applicant assumes that because they possess a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit, they are permitted to carry a concealed firearm in any location, including a church, as the permit signifies their right to do so. Option B. The applicant believes their personal moral stance on carrying a firearm in a church is paramount and dictates whether it is legally permissible for them to do so, regardless of specific Nevada statutes. Option C. The applicant understands that Nevada law explicitly prohibits carrying a concealed firearm in a courthouse, detention facility, or a building where a court is located, and their personal belief about carrying in a church does not override these specific statutory prohibitions. Option D. The applicant believes that if a church does not explicitly post a sign prohibiting firearms, then carrying a concealed firearm there is legally permissible under Nevada law. The correct answer is C. The applicant understands that Nevada law explicitly prohibits carrying a concealed firearm in a courthouse, detention facility, or a building where a court is located, and their personal belief about carrying in a church does not override these specific statutory prohibitions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of Nevada's concealed firearm laws beyond simple memorization. The applicant must apply legal principles to a practical, albeit hypothetical, situation involving potential conflicts between personal beliefs and legal obligations. This requires careful judgment to ensure compliance with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, Chapter 202, specifically concerning the lawful carrying of concealed firearms and the circumstances under which such carrying may be restricted or prohibited. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the applicant accurately recalling and applying the specific prohibitions outlined in Nevada law regarding the carrying of concealed firearms in certain locations. This approach correctly identifies that Nevada law explicitly prohibits carrying a concealed firearm in a courthouse, a detention facility, or a building where a court is located. The applicant's understanding that their personal belief about carrying in a church does not supersede the explicit legal restrictions is paramount. This aligns with the ethical obligation of any firearm permit holder to strictly adhere to all statutory provisions governing the lawful possession and carrying of firearms, regardless of personal opinions or interpretations of less clearly defined situations. The Nevada legislature has defined specific locations where carrying is prohibited, and adherence to these defined prohibitions is the cornerstone of legal and responsible concealed carry. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves the applicant believing their personal moral stance on carrying a firearm in a church overrides Nevada law. This is a critical failure because Nevada law, as codified in NRS 202-245, specifically prohibits carrying a concealed firearm in a courthouse, detention facility, or a building where a court is located. While churches are not explicitly listed in this statute as prohibited locations for concealed carry, the applicant's assumption that their personal belief dictates legality is fundamentally flawed. Legal compliance in Nevada requires adherence to statutory mandates, not personal moral interpretations, especially when those interpretations lead to actions that could be misconstrued or legally challenged. Another incorrect approach is the applicant focusing solely on the fact that they possess a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. While the permit signifies eligibility and training, it does not grant carte blanche to carry a firearm in any location. The permit is subject to numerous restrictions and prohibitions outlined in Nevada law. Believing the permit itself negates all other legal considerations is a dangerous misinterpretation of the law and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the full scope of responsibilities associated with concealed carry. A further incorrect approach is the applicant assuming that if a location does not explicitly post a prohibition against firearms, then carrying is permitted. Nevada law establishes specific locations where carrying is prohibited by statute, irrespective of signage. While signage can provide additional notice and create separate offenses, e.g., trespassing, the absence of a sign does not automatically legalize carrying in a location that is otherwise legally restricted or where carrying could lead to other legal complications. The applicant must be aware of the statutory prohibitions, not just rely on the presence or absence of posted signs. Professional reasoning. Professionals seeking or holding a concealed firearm permit in Nevada must adopt a decision-making process rooted in strict statutory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding all relevant Nevada revised statutes pertaining to firearms, including NRS Chapter 202 and any other applicable sections. 2. Recognizing that a concealed firearm permit is a privilege, not an absolute right, and is subject to numerous legal restrictions. 3. Prioritizing statutory prohibitions over personal beliefs or assumptions about legality. 4. Actively seeking clarification on any ambiguous situations by consulting official legal resources or legal counsel, rather than making assumptions. 5. Understanding that ignorance of the law is not a defense. Question 6. The evaluation methodology shows that a Nevada resident who holds a valid concealed firearm permit is driving their vehicle and needs to transport a handgun. They are concerned about complying with Nevada revised statutes regarding firearm transportation. Which of the following methods of transporting the handgun in their vehicle best adheres to Nevada law? Option A. The handgun is unloaded and placed in a locked case in the passenger seat. Option B. The handgun is loaded and placed in the glove compartment, which is locked. Option C. The handgun is unloaded and placed in a locked case in the trunk, but the ammunition is also placed in the same locked case. Option D. The handgun is unloaded and placed in a locked case, which is then stored in the trunk of the vehicle. The ammunition is stored separately in a different locked container in the trunk. The correct answer is D. The handgun is unloaded and placed in a locked case, which is then stored in the trunk of the vehicle. The ammunition is stored separately in a different locked container in the trunk. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that understanding the nuances of Nevada's concealed firearm laws is paramount for responsible gun ownership and public safety. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their right to self-defense with strict adherence to legal requirements, particularly concerning the transportation of a firearm. Misinterpreting or neglecting these regulations can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of a concealed firearm permit. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance in all circumstances. The best professional practice involves understanding that Nevada law, specifically NRS 202-3673, outlines the conditions under which a concealed firearm may be carried. When transporting a firearm in a vehicle, even if not actively carrying it on your person, it must be unloaded and in a locked container. This container must be separate from the ammunition. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the statutory requirements for transporting firearms in Nevada, ensuring the weapon is secured and inaccessible, thereby minimizing the risk of accidental discharge or unauthorized access. This practice upholds both the letter of the law and the spirit of responsible firearm handling. An incorrect approach would be to assume that because the firearm is not on the person, it can be left loaded in the glove compartment. This fails to meet the Nevada legal requirement for an unloaded firearm in a locked container separate from ammunition. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it directly contravenes NRS 202, 3673. Another incorrect approach would be to carry the firearm loaded but concealed within a locked container, without ensuring the container itself is locked. This is also a regulatory failure because while the firearm might be in a container, the lack of a lock on that container means it is not secured as required by Nevada law. A final incorrect approach would be to transport the firearm unloaded, but in the same container as the ammunition. This is a critical regulatory failure, as Nevada law explicitly requires the firearm and ammunition to be stored separately when transported in a vehicle. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and verifying specific state laws. This involves consulting official Nevada revised statutes, seeking guidance from licensed firearm instructors familiar with Nevada law, and always erring on the side of caution by adhering to the strictest interpretation of the law when in doubt. A proactive approach to legal knowledge is essential for maintaining a concealed firearm permit and ensuring safe and lawful firearm possession. Question 7. Quality control measures reveal that a Nevada concealed firearm permit holder observes a group of individuals behaving in a manner that appears suspicious and potentially disruptive in a public park. The individuals are not overtly threatening anyone, but their actions are causing concern among other park-goers. What is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action for the permit holder? Option A. Remain calm. Observe the situation from a safe distance without engaging directly, and immediately contact Nevada law enforcement to report the suspicious activity. Option B. Approach the individuals directly and verbally challenge them regarding their actions, demanding they cease their behavior. Option C. Immediately draw your concealed firearm and approach the individuals to confront them about their behavior. Option D. Discreetly leave the park without reporting the individuals or taking any further action. The correct answer is A. Remain calm, observe the situation from a safe distance without engaging directly, and immediately contact Nevada law enforcement to report the suspicious activity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the complexities of Nevada's concealed firearm laws while also considering the ethical implications of their actions in a public setting. The core challenge lies in balancing the legal right to carry a concealed firearm with the responsibility to act in a manner that does not create undue alarm or violate public order, especially when encountering a situation that might be perceived as a threat, but is not an immediate, overt danger. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between a legitimate need for self-defense and actions that could be misinterpreted or lead to escalation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves remaining calm, assessing the situation from a safe distance without direct engagement, and immediately contacting law enforcement. This approach is correct because Nevada law, while permitting concealed carry for permit holders, also emphasizes responsible and lawful conduct. Engaging directly with a perceived threat without an immediate and overt danger could be construed as provocative or unnecessary, potentially leading to legal repercussions or escalating a situation that might otherwise be resolved peacefully. Contacting law enforcement ensures that trained professionals can assess and manage the situation, upholding public safety and adhering to the spirit of the law, which prioritizes de-escalation and lawful resolution. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately drawing your firearm to confront the individuals. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Nevada law does not grant permit holders the right to act as vigilantes or to preemptively engage individuals based on suspicion alone. Drawing a firearm in a non-imminent threat situation can be considered brandishing, which is illegal and can lead to severe penalties, including permit revocation. Ethically, it escalates a situation unnecessarily and creates a high risk of harm to oneself and others. Another incorrect approach is to approach the individuals directly and verbally challenge them about their behavior. While seemingly an attempt to resolve the situation, this bypasses the proper channels for addressing potential disturbances and can be perceived as aggressive. Nevada law expects permit holders to act responsibly, and direct confrontation without an immediate threat is not considered responsible conduct. This approach risks escalating the situation and could lead to a confrontation where the permit holder's actions are scrutinized for their necessity and lawfulness. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the situation entirely and leave the area without taking any action. While leaving a potentially dangerous situation is often a wise personal safety choice, in this context, it fails to address a potential public disturbance. Nevada law and responsible gun ownership principles suggest a duty to act lawfully and reasonably when encountering situations that could impact public safety, even if it means reporting it. While not as egregious as drawing a weapon, it represents a missed opportunity to contribute to public safety through proper channels. Professional reasoning. Professionals faced with such a scenario should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety, legality, and responsible action. This framework involves 1. Immediate threat assessment. Is there an immediate and overt danger to life or serious bodily harm? 2. Legal compliance. What are the specific Nevada statutes regarding concealed carry and public disturbances? 3. De-escalation. What actions can be taken to reduce tension and prevent escalation? 4. Reporting. When and how should law enforcement be contacted? In this case, the absence of an immediate threat dictates that direct engagement or brandishing is inappropriate. The most responsible and legally sound course of action is to observe from a distance and report to the authorities, allowing them to handle the situation. Question 8. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a concealed firearm permit holder in Nevada is confronted by an individual who is verbally aggressive and making menacing gestures, but not physically attacking. The permit holder is in a public park. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Engage verbally with the aggressor to de-escalate the situation through argument. Option B. Rely on their permit as justification to use force if the aggressor comes within arm's reach. Option C. Immediately draw their concealed firearm to deter the aggressor. Option D. Assess if a safe and reasonable retreat is possible before considering any further action. The correct answer is D. Assess if a safe and reasonable retreat is possible before considering any further action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only knowledge of Nevada's concealed firearm laws, but also the ability to apply them ethically and responsibly in a real-world context. The challenge lies in distinguishing between legally permissible actions and those that could lead to permit revocation or criminal charges, emphasizing the importance of understanding the nuances of self-defense and the duty to retreat. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with NRS 202, 3673, and related statutes, which govern the issuance and conditions of concealed firearm permits in Nevada. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding that Nevada law, under NRS 202, 3673, generally requires an individual to retreat if they can do so safely before using deadly force, unless they are in their home or a place where they have a right to be and are not the initial aggressor. Therefore, the approach that prioritizes assessing the possibility of safe retreat before resorting to the use of a firearm aligns with the legal and ethical standards for concealed carry permit holders in Nevada. This approach reflects a commitment to de-escalation and the preservation of life, which are paramount considerations under Nevada law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves believing that the mere possession of a concealed firearm permit grants an absolute right to use deadly force in any perceived threat situation. This fails to acknowledge the legal duty to retreat where safely possible, as stipulated by Nevada law. Such a belief could lead to unlawful use of force and subsequent legal repercussions, including the revocation of the concealed firearm permit. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any defensive action taken while carrying a concealed firearm is automatically justified. This overlooks the critical elements of proportionality and necessity. Nevada law, like most jurisdictions, requires that the force used be reasonable and necessary to repel the threat. Acting solely on perceived threat without considering the proportionality of the response is a significant legal and ethical failure. A third incorrect approach is to rely on personal interpretations of self-defense rather than adhering strictly to the established legal framework of Nevada. Personal interpretations can be subjective and may not align with statutory requirements, leading to actions that are not legally defensible and could result in criminal charges and the loss of permit privileges. Professional reasoning. Professionals seeking or holding a concealed firearm permit in Nevada should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical responsibility, and de-escalation. This framework involves 1. Thoroughly understanding Nevada statutes related to concealed firearms and self-defense, particularly the duty to retreat. 2. Practicing situational awareness to identify potential threats and opportunities for safe retreat. 3. Prioritizing de-escalation and avoiding confrontation whenever possible. 4. If force becomes necessary, ensuring it is a last resort, reasonable, and proportionate to the threat, always in accordance with Nevada law. Question 9. Benchmark analysis indicates a significant number of concealed firearm permit holders in Nevada may be uncertain about their immediate obligations when interacting with law enforcement. Considering Nevada revised statutes, what is the most prudent and legally compliant course of action for a permit holder who is stopped by a peace officer and knows they are carrying a concealed firearm? Option A. Wait for the peace officer to ask if you are carrying any weapons before disclosing the firearm. Option B. Attempt to subtly move the firearm to a less accessible location or make a vague statement about being unarmed. Option C. Immediately and clearly inform the peace officer that you are in possession of a concealed firearm and that you hold a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. Option D. State that you are unaware of any requirement to disclose the presence of a firearm to a peace officer. The correct answer is C. Immediately and clearly inform the peace officer that you are in possession of a concealed firearm and that you hold a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the delicate balance between exercising a legal right and ensuring public safety, particularly when encountering law enforcement. Misinterpreting or misapplying Nevada concealed firearm laws in such a situation can lead to serious legal consequences, including arrest and revocation of the permit, as well as potential endangerment to oneself and others. The core of the challenge lies in understanding the specific reporting requirements when carrying a concealed firearm and interacting with a peace officer. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and clearly informing the peace officer that you are in possession of a concealed firearm and that you hold a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. This approach is correct because Nevada revised statutes, NRS 202-3673, explicitly requires a person who possesses a permit to carry a concealed firearm to inform a peace officer of the fact that he or she is in possession of a firearm, when the person knows or reasonably should know that the peace officer is a peace officer. This direct and truthful disclosure is paramount for officer safety and adherence to the law. It demonstrates responsible gun ownership and respect for the legal framework governing concealed carry. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to inform the officer or waiting until the officer discovers the firearm independently is a direct violation of NRS 202-3673. This failure creates an unnecessary safety risk for the officer and the permit holder, as the officer may perceive the situation as more threatening if the firearm is discovered unexpectedly. It also demonstrates a lack of understanding or disregard for the legal obligation to disclose. Attempting to conceal the firearm or its presence further, or making a vague statement that does not clearly indicate possession of a firearm, is also a regulatory failure. The law requires a clear and unambiguous notification. Ambiguity can lead to misinterpretation by the officer and potentially escalate the situation. Providing false information about the firearm or the permit, or claiming ignorance of the law when a permit has been issued, constitutes a serious ethical and regulatory breach. This undermines the integrity of the permitting system and can have severe legal repercussions beyond the immediate interaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach interactions with law enforcement while carrying a concealed firearm with a clear understanding of their legal obligations. The decision-making process should prioritize transparency and compliance with Nevada law. This involves 1. Knowing the specific requirements of NRS 202, 3673 regarding notification of a peace officer. 2. Prioritizing officer safety through immediate and clear disclosure. 3. Maintaining composure and cooperating with the officer's instructions. 4. Understanding that adherence to the law is not optional but a mandatory condition of carrying a concealed firearm. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals that a Nevada concealed firearm permit holder is considering optimizing their ammunition inventory. They currently store 5,000 rounds of 9mm ammunition, which has an average purchase price of $0.35 per round. The annual cost of secure, climate-controlled storage for this quantity is estimated at $150. Insurance for this inventory adds an annual cost of $50. There is a projected annual depreciation or potential obsolescence rate of 2% on the total value of the stored ammunition. The cost to acquire ammunition on demand, including travel and transaction fees, is $20 per acquisition event. If the permit holder anticipates needing 5,000 rounds over the next year, what is the minimum number of acquisition events required to make on-demand purchasing more cost-effective than maintaining the current inventory level? Option A, 15 acquisition events. Option B, 20 acquisition events. Option C, 5 acquisition events. Option D, 10 acquisition events. The correct answer is D, 10 acquisition events. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a need to reevaluate the cost-effectiveness of maintaining a specific inventory level for ammunition, considering Nevada's concealed firearm permit regulations and the associated costs of storage and potential obsolescence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency and financial prudence with the legal and ethical responsibilities of responsible firearm ownership and storage, as mandated by Nevada law. A miscalculation could lead to either unnecessary expenditure or, more critically, a compromise in the safe and legal accessibility of essential self-defense tools. The best approach involves a precise calculation of the total annual cost of holding a specific quantity of ammunition, factoring in storage, insurance, and potential depreciation, and comparing this to the cost of acquiring ammunition on demand. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the financial implications of inventory management, while adhering to the spirit of Nevada law, which emphasizes responsible possession. By quantifying the costs associated with holding excess inventory, such as specialized climate-controlled storage that might be required for certain types of ammunition to prevent degradation, and comparing it to the transactional costs of purchasing ammunition as needed, a data-driven decision can be made. This aligns with the principle of prudent resource management expected of permit holders. An incorrect approach would be to simply estimate the cost based on a rough percentage of the ammunition's value, without accounting for specific storage requirements or the time value of money. This fails to provide an accurate financial picture and could lead to suboptimal inventory decisions, potentially resulting in overspending on storage or insufficient stock when needed. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize having the largest possible quantity of ammunition on hand regardless of cost, based on a subjective interpretation of preparedness. This disregards the financial burden and the practicalities of safe storage, potentially violating the principle of responsible ownership by creating an undue risk or expense. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the purchase price of ammunition and ignores all associated holding costs is also flawed, as it presents an incomplete financial analysis. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements for ammunition storage in Nevada. This should be followed by a thorough cost-benefit analysis, meticulously calculating all relevant costs, storage, insurance, potential spoilage/obsolescence, security measures, and comparing them to the costs of on-demand acquisition. This quantitative approach, grounded in factual data and regulatory compliance, ensures that decisions are both financially sound and legally responsible. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that responsible concealed firearm carriers in Nevada must constantly weigh the potential benefits of immediate self-defense against the significant risks and legal ramifications of improper firearm use. Considering the legal framework of Nevada, which of the following approaches best reflects the professional and lawful conduct expected when encountering a potentially threatening situation? Option A. Draw your concealed firearm to deter any individual who appears aggressive or makes you feel uncomfortable, regardless of whether an immediate threat is present. Option B. Immediately confront any individual who you perceive as a potential threat, using your concealed firearm if you believe they might become dangerous in the future. Option C. Objectively assess if there is an imminent threat of death or substantial bodily harm to yourself or another person, and only then consider the use of a concealed firearm as a last resort. Option D. Rely on your intuition and gut feeling to determine if a situation warrants the display of your concealed firearm, prioritizing your personal sense of safety above all else. The correct answer is C. Objectively assess if there is an imminent threat of death or substantial bodily harm to yourself or another person, and only then consider the use of a concealed firearm as a last resort. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance the immediate perceived need for self-defense with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding the carrying of a concealed firearm in Nevada. Misjudging the situation or acting impulsively based on fear rather than a clear and present danger can lead to severe legal consequences and compromise public safety. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing threat levels and understanding the precise legal boundaries of justified force. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective assessment of the immediate threat. This means evaluating whether the individual's life or the life of another is in imminent danger of death or substantial bodily harm. If such a threat is objectively present and unavoidable by other means, then the use of a concealed firearm may be justified. This approach aligns with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS 200, 120 through 200, 160, which define justifiable homicide and the right to self-defense, emphasizing the necessity of an immediate and serious threat. It requires a calm, rational decision-making process, prioritizing de-escalation and avoiding any action that could be perceived as aggressive or retaliatory. Incorrect approaches analysis. Acting solely on a feeling of unease or a perceived slight, without an objectively verifiable imminent threat of death or substantial bodily harm, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Nevada law does not permit the use of deadly force based on subjective feelings of discomfort or potential future harm. This approach violates the core principles of justifiable self-defense by lacking the required imminence and severity of threat. Drawing a firearm or brandishing it in a manner that could be interpreted as a threat or intimidation, even if no shots are fired, can constitute assault with a deadly weapon under Nevada law NRS 200. 471. This is a serious offense and a clear regulatory failure, as it escalates a situation unnecessarily and creates a dangerous environment, regardless of the initial perceived threat. Fleeing the situation when a reasonable opportunity exists to do so safely, rather than confronting a perceived threat, is also a consideration. While self-defense is a right, the law often implies a duty to retreat if it can be done safely, especially if the confrontation is not initiated by the defender. However, in Nevada, the stand-your-ground principle applies in certain contexts, meaning retreat is not always required if lawfully present. The failure here would be an asterisk, not asterisk, considering safe retreat if available, but more critically, in escalating the situation when de-escalation or avoidance was a viable and safer option. The primary failure in this context is not the consideration of retreat itself, but the failure to prioritize de-escalation and avoidance of confrontation when possible, which is a fundamental ethical consideration for responsible firearm carriers. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes threat assessment, legal compliance, and de-escalation. This involves 1. Situational awareness, constantly observing the environment and identifying potential threats. 2. Threat assessment, objectively evaluating the imminence and severity of any perceived danger, asking, is my life or the life of another in immediate danger of death or substantial bodily harm? 3. Legal knowledge, understanding Nevada's laws regarding justifiable homicide and self-defense NRS 200, 120-200, 160. 4. De-escalation, actively seeking opportunities to disengage or de-escalate a situation before resorting to force. 5. Proportionality, ensuring any response is proportionate to the threat. 6. Documentation, if force is used, meticulously documenting the events. This framework emphasizes responsible and lawful firearm carriage, prioritizing safety and adherence to legal statutes. Question 12. Implementation of responsible firearm handling and legal compliance in Nevada. What is the most appropriate action for a concealed firearm permit holder to take when lawfully stopped by a Nevada Highway Patrol officer for a traffic violation, and the permit holder is carrying a concealed firearm? Option A. Wait for the Nevada Highway Patrol officer to discover the concealed firearm during the stop and then inform them. Option B. Conceal the firearm and permit and only reveal them if the Nevada Highway Patrol officer specifically asks if the permit holder is carrying a firearm. Option C. Immediately and calmly inform the Nevada Highway Patrol officer of the presence of the concealed firearm and present the valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. Option D. Attempt to leave the scene discreetly before the Nevada Highway Patrol officer can fully engage to avoid any complications related to carrying a firearm. The correct answer is C. Immediately and calmly inform the Nevada Highway Patrol officer of the presence of the concealed firearm and present the valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the right to self-defense with the legal obligations and responsibilities associated with carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada. Misinterpreting or failing to adhere to Nevada revised statutes, NRS, concerning concealed firearms can lead to severe legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of permit privileges. Careful judgment is required to ensure actions taken are both lawful and ethically sound, prioritizing public safety and adherence to the law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately and calmly informing the responding officer about the presence of the firearm and presenting the valid Nevada concealed firearm permit. This approach is correct because NRS 202-3673 explicitly requires a person who has a permit to carry a concealed firearm to inform a peace officer of the fact that they are carrying a concealed firearm and to present the permit upon the request of the peace officer. This direct and compliant communication ensures transparency, respects law enforcement's need to know for safety, and upholds the legal requirements for permit holders. Incorrect approaches analysis, failing to inform the officer about the firearm and permit, and instead waiting for the officer to discover it, is a regulatory failure. This violates NRS 202-3673 by not proactively informing the officer as required. It also creates an unnecessary safety risk for the officer and the individual, potentially leading to a heightened and dangerous situation. Concealing the firearm and permit and only revealing them if directly asked about the firearm's presence, without mentioning the permit, is also a regulatory failure. While the permit might be presented if asked about the firearm, the initial requirement to inform the officer of carrying a concealed firearm is not fully met. This approach lacks the proactive transparency mandated by law. Attempting to leave the scene without informing the officer about the firearm or permit, or engaging in any evasive behavior, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action directly violates the spirit and letter of NRS 202-3673 and demonstrates a disregard for lawful procedures. Such behavior could be interpreted as an attempt to conceal illegal activity and would likely result in severe legal penalties beyond just firearm permit violations. Professional reasoning. Professionals carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes immediate, honest, and complete communication with law enforcement when interacting with them. This framework involves understanding the specific legal requirements of NRS 202-3673, recognizing that proactive disclosure of a concealed firearm and permit is mandatory, and acting in a manner that ensures the safety of all parties involved while upholding legal obligations. When in doubt, always err on the side of full and immediate disclosure to law enforcement. Question 13. To address the challenge of a Nevada concealed firearm permit holder discovering that their romantic partner, with whom they reside, has a prior felony conviction that was not disclosed during the permit application process, what is the most responsible course of action to ensure compliance with Nevada law? Option A. Immediately and truthfully disclose the relationship and the presence of the firearm to the Nevada Sheriff's Department or its designated representative. Option B. Seek advice from another Nevada concealed firearm permit holder about how to handle the situation without directly contacting the sheriff's department. Option C. Assume that since the firearm is legally owned and the relationship is personal, no disclosure is necessary as long as the partner's conviction does not directly involve the permit holder. Option D. Disclose the relationship to the sheriff's department, but omit any mention of the firearm, believing it to be a separate matter. The correct answer is A. Immediately and truthfully disclose the relationship and the presence of the firearm to the Nevada Sheriff's Department or its designated representative. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate a situation where a personal relationship might influence their judgment regarding firearm possession and legal compliance in Nevada. The core challenge lies in upholding the strict requirements of Nevada's concealed firearm laws, while managing potential conflicts of interest or perceived impropriety arising from a close personal connection. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are in strict adherence to the law and do not create an appearance of impropriety that could jeopardize the permit holder's status or public trust. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice in this situation is to immediately and truthfully disclose the relationship and the firearm's presence to the appropriate authorities, specifically the Nevada Sheriff's Department or its designated representative, as per Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, Chapter 202. This approach is correct because it prioritizes transparency and compliance with Nevada law. NRS 202-3673 requires permit holders to notify the sheriff of any change of address and implicitly requires reporting of circumstances that might affect permit eligibility or the legality of carrying a concealed firearm. By proactively disclosing, the individual demonstrates a commitment to legal and ethical conduct, allowing authorities to assess the situation within the framework of Nevada's concealed firearm laws and determine if any further action or clarification is necessary. This upholds the integrity of the concealed firearm permit system. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the relationship is personal and the firearm is legally owned, no disclosure is necessary. This fails to recognize that Nevada law may have specific reporting requirements for situations that could be construed as a conflict of interest or a change in circumstances that warrants review by the issuing authority. Ignoring potential legal implications or reporting obligations under NRS 202-3673 is a significant regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach is to only disclose the relationship but not the presence of the firearm, or vice versa. This partial disclosure is insufficient and can be misleading. Nevada law emphasizes full and truthful reporting. Failing to disclose all relevant information, such as the firearm itself in this context, can be interpreted as an attempt to circumvent reporting requirements, leading to potential legal repercussions for the permit holder. A third incorrect approach is to seek advice from a friend or acquaintance who is also a concealed firearm permit holder in Nevada, rather than contacting the official issuing authority. While peer advice can sometimes be helpful, it is not a substitute for direct communication with the Nevada Sheriff's Department. Relying on informal advice could lead to misinterpretations of Nevada law and regulations, potentially resulting in noncompliance with NRS 202-3673 and related statutes. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant jurisdiction's laws and regulations, Nevada Revised Statutes concerning concealed firearms. 2. Assessing the potential impact of personal circumstances on legal obligations. 3. Prioritizing transparency and proactive communication with the issuing authority. 4. Seeking official guidance when in doubt, rather than relying on informal sources. 5. Documenting all communications and actions taken for personal record-keeping. Question 14. The review process indicates that a Nevada applicant for a concealed firearm permit has a prior misdemeanor conviction for domestic battery. Which of the following actions best reflects the required due diligence and adherence to Nevada law? Option A. Base the decision to grant or deny the permit on a subjective assessment of the applicant's perceived trustworthiness, irrespective of specific statutory disqualifications. Option B. Automatically deny the concealed firearm permit application upon discovering any misdemeanor conviction, regardless of its nature or specific legal implications under Nevada law. Option C. Issue the concealed firearm permit immediately, assuming that a misdemeanor conviction does not automatically preclude an applicant, without verifying its classification or impact on firearm possession under Nevada statutes. Option D. Conduct a detailed review of the specific Nevada revised statutes and relevant federal laws pertaining to misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence to determine if the applicant's conviction disqualifies them from obtaining a concealed firearm permit, and inform the applicant of the findings and any applicable appeal or mitigation processes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed review of the specific Nevada revised statutes and relevant federal laws pertaining to misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence to determine if the applicant's conviction disqualifies them from obtaining a concealed firearm permit, and inform the applicant of the findings and any applicable appeal or mitigation processes. Explanation. The review process indicates a scenario where a Nevada resident applying for a concealed firearm permit has a past misdemeanor conviction for domestic battery. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Nevada's firearm laws, specifically NRS 202/360, which outlines the criteria for permit denial. The applicant's past conviction directly implicates the prohibited person status, necessitating careful adherence to statutory requirements. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history against the specific disqualifiers outlined in Nevada revised statutes. This includes determining if the domestic battery conviction falls under the definition of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, as defined by federal law and Nevada statutes, which would prohibit the issuance of a concealed firearm permit. The applicant must be informed of the specific statutory grounds for potential denial and provided with an opportunity to present any mitigating circumstances or evidence that might demonstrate they are not prohibited from possessing a firearm under Nevada law. This aligns with the principles of due process and fair application of the law. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based solely on the presence of any misdemeanor conviction, without further statutory analysis. This fails to account for the specific nuances of domestic violence convictions and their impact on firearm rights under Nevada law. Another incorrect approach would be to issue the permit without a comprehensive review of the conviction's classification, potentially violating NRS 202/360 and federal law. Finally, an approach that involves making a subjective judgment about the applicant's character without grounding it in specific statutory prohibitions would be professionally unsound and legally indefensible. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes statutory compliance, due process, and objective evaluation. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant statutes, NRS 202/360, federal definitions of misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. 2. Conducting a factual investigation into the nature and classification of the conviction. 3. Applying the statutory criteria to the facts. 4. Providing the applicant with clear communication regarding potential disqualifications and their rights. 5. Making a decision based strictly on the legal framework. Question 15. Examination of the data shows a Nevada concealed firearm permit holder is attending a public event at community center that also houses a polling station. The permit holder is unsure if carrying a concealed firearm is permissible within the community center due to the presence of the polling station. What is the most prudent course of action? Option A. Approach the poll workers and demand to know if carrying a firearm is permitted. Option B. Continue to carry the concealed firearm within the community center, assuming that a valid permit allows carry in all public spaces. Option C. Discreetly place the firearm in a restroom stall within the community center until the event concludes. Option D. Immediately leave the community center with the firearm and seek clarification on the specific regulations regarding firearms at polling locations and community centers in Nevada. The correct answer is D. Immediately leave the community center with the firearm and seek clarification on the specific regulations regarding firearms at polling locations and community centers in Nevada. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving a potential violation of Nevada's concealed firearm laws. A permit holder is observed carrying a firearm in a location where concealed carry might be restricted, requiring the individual to exercise judgment and knowledge of specific Nevada statutes. The challenge lies in understanding the nuances of permissible carry locations and the actions to take when unsure of the legality of a particular situation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately ceasing to carry the firearm in the potentially restricted area and seeking clarification on the legality of carrying in that specific location. This approach prioritizes compliance with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, Chapter 202, specifically sections pertaining to carrying concealed weapons and prohibited locations. By disengaging from the potentially unlawful act and proactively seeking information, the individual demonstrates a commitment to upholding the law and avoiding any potential violations. This aligns with the ethical obligation of a permit holder to be fully aware of and adhere to all restrictions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to continue carrying the firearm in the potentially restricted area, assuming that since a permit is held, carry is permissible everywhere. This fails to acknowledge that Nevada law, like most jurisdictions, has specific exceptions and prohibitions regarding where a concealed firearm can be carried, even by a permit holder. This action directly risks violating NRS 202/300, which outlines prohibited locations. Another incorrect approach is to immediately discard the firearm in a public place. While this removes the firearm from the potentially restricted area, it creates a new safety hazard and is not a legally sanctioned method of dealing with a potential violation. Discarding a firearm irresponsibly can lead to its discovery by unauthorized individuals and potential criminal charges related to improper firearm storage or abandonment. A further incorrect approach is to confront the individual who observed the firearm and demand to know why they are paying attention. This is an aggressive and unprofessional response that escalates the situation unnecessarily. It distracts from the core issue of potential legal compliance and could lead to further complications or misunderstandings. The focus should remain on understanding and adhering to firearm regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in possession of a concealed firearm permit in Nevada should adopt a proactive and informed approach. When faced with uncertainty about the legality of carrying in a specific location, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate cessation of carry in the questionable area. 2. Seeking authoritative clarification from law enforcement or official state resources regarding the specific location's restrictions. 3. Maintaining a calm and lawful demeanor at all times. This systematic approach ensures adherence to Nevada law and upholds the responsibilities associated with carrying a concealed firearm. Question 16. Upon reviewing an applicant's background for a Nevada concealed firearm permit, it is noted that the applicant has a history of carrying a concealed firearm into a public school's administrative office, even though they possessed a valid permit at the time. Considering Nevada Revised Statutes, what is the most appropriate assessment of this situation regarding the applicant's eligibility for a concealed firearm permit? Option A. The applicant's actions constitute a violation of Nevada law prohibiting firearms in school zones, which would likely lead to the denial of their concealed firearm permit application. Option B. The applicant's perceived need for self-defense in that location justifies their actions, and therefore, their permit eligibility should not be negatively impacted. Option C. Since the firearm was concealed, the applicant did not violate any laws, as the prohibition only applies to openly carried firearms. Option D. The applicant's possession of a valid concealed firearm permit at the time of the incident negates any violation, as permit holders are generally allowed to carry firearms. Correct answer is A. The applicant's actions constitute a violation of Nevada law prohibiting firearms in school zones, which would likely lead to the denial of their concealed firearm permit application. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to understand the nuances of Nevada law regarding the carrying of concealed firearms, specifically concerning the permissible locations and the legal implications of carrying a firearm in a prohibited area. Misinterpreting these regulations can lead to serious legal consequences, including the denial or revocation of a concealed firearm permit and potential criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legally permissible and prohibited locations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding of Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, Chapter 202, specifically NRS 245, which outlines prohibited locations for carrying a concealed firearm. This approach prioritizes adherence to the law by recognizing that a school zone, as defined by NRS 245, 1F, is a strictly prohibited area for carrying a concealed firearm unless specific exceptions apply, which are not present in this scenario. Therefore, the applicant must correctly identify that carrying a concealed firearm into a school zone is a violation of Nevada law, irrespective of whether the firearm is concealed or openly displayed, and would likely result in the denial of their permit application. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves believing that simply having a concealed firearm permit automatically grants permission to carry a firearm in all locations, including prohibited ones. This fails to acknowledge that permit holders are still bound by specific location restrictions outlined in Nevada law. The regulatory failure here is a fundamental misunderstanding of the scope and limitations of a concealed firearm permit. Another incorrect approach is to assume that if the firearm is concealed, it is permissible to carry it in a school zone. This ignores the explicit prohibition against carrying firearms in school zones, regardless of whether they are concealed or openly carried, as stipulated by NRS 245. The ethical failure is a disregard for the safety and security of students and staff, which is the underlying purpose of such restrictions. A further incorrect approach is to believe that personal discretion, or a perceived need for self-defense, overrides the specific legal prohibitions in Nevada. While self-defense is a consideration in firearm ownership, it does not grant the right to violate established laws regarding carrying firearms in prohibited areas like school zones. This approach demonstrates a lack of respect for the legal framework designed to maintain public safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive review of all applicable Nevada Revised Statutes related to firearms. This includes understanding the definitions of prohibited locations and the specific requirements and limitations associated with concealed firearm permits. When faced with a scenario involving a potential violation, the professional must prioritize strict legal compliance. If there is any doubt about the legality of carrying a firearm in a particular location, the safest and most legally sound decision is to refrain from carrying the firearm in that location. This proactive approach minimizes risk and upholds the integrity of the permitting process and public safety. Question 17. When evaluating the permissible locations for carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada, what is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for a permit holder? Option A. Carry a concealed firearm into a courthouse if it appears to have robust security personnel and screening procedures in place. Option B. Rely on personal judgment regarding the safety of a location to determine whether carrying a concealed firearm is appropriate, even if it is a statutorily prohibited area. Option C. Assume that any publicly accessible building is permissible for concealed carry unless there is a clear sign prohibiting firearms. Option D. Strictly adhere to Nevada Revised Statutes, avoiding any location explicitly prohibited by law, such as courthouses or detention facilities, irrespective of perceived security measures. The correct answer is D. Strictly adhere to Nevada Revised Statutes, avoiding any location explicitly prohibited by law, such as courthouses or detention facilities, irrespective of perceived security measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate the nuances of Nevada law regarding the carrying of firearms in public places, specifically concerning the distinction between concealed and open carry, and the permissible locations for carrying a firearm. Misinterpreting these regulations can lead to serious legal consequences, including criminal charges and the revocation of a concealed firearm permit. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Nevada Revised Statutes, NRS, and to uphold responsible firearm ownership. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and strictly adhering to the specific prohibitions outlined in Nevada law for carrying a concealed firearm. This means recognizing that even with a valid permit, certain locations are off-limits. Specifically, NRS 245 prohibits carrying a concealed firearm into a place where federal law prohibits the possession of firearms, or into a courthouse, detention facility, or a building that houses a courtroom. Therefore, the correct approach is to avoid carrying a concealed firearm in any of these statutorily prohibited locations, regardless of personal belief about the safety of the location or the presence of security. This approach directly aligns with the legal framework established by Nevada statutes, ensuring lawful conduct and maintaining the integrity of the concealed firearm permit system. Incorrect approaches analysis. Carrying a concealed firearm into a courthouse, even if it appears to have adequate security, is a direct violation of NRS 202-245. This statute makes no exceptions for perceived security levels. Relying on personal judgment about the safety of a location that is explicitly prohibited by law is a regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because a location is publicly accessible, it is permissible to carry a concealed firearm there. Nevada law specifically carves out exceptions for certain public buildings and areas, and a general assumption of permissibility is a dangerous misinterpretation of the law. Finally, believing that a concealed firearm permit grants unrestricted carry rights in all public spaces is fundamentally flawed. The permit signifies authorization to carry concealed, but it does not override specific statutory prohibitions on where such carrying is allowed. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the limitations imposed by Nevada law. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach firearm carry regulations with a commitment to thorough understanding and strict adherence to the law. This involves proactively familiarizing oneself with all relevant statutes, including NRS 202, 245, and any other applicable sections concerning firearm possession and carry. When in doubt about the legality of carrying a firearm in a particular location, the professional decision-making process should prioritize seeking clarification from official sources, such as law enforcement agencies or legal counsel, rather than making assumptions. The guiding principle should always be to err on the side of caution and ensure absolute compliance with the letter of the law. Question 18. The analysis reveals that a Nevada resident has applied for a concealed firearm permit, and their background check indicates a misdemeanor conviction for disturbing the peace that occurred 5 years ago, and an arrest for simple battery 2 years ago which did not result in a conviction. Considering the requirements for obtaining a concealed firearm permit in Nevada, which of the following actions best reflects the appropriate professional response? Option A. Deny the permit application solely based on the arrest for simple battery, as any interaction with law enforcement suggests a lack of good moral character required for permit issuance. Option B. Grant the permit application without further review, assuming that since the offenses are not recent felonies, they are not disqualifying. Option C. Review the applicant's record to determine if the misdemeanor conviction or the arrest for simple battery are specifically listed as disqualifying offenses under Nevada revised statutes concerning concealed firearm permits, and proceed based on that statutory determination. Option D. Deny the permit application immediately due to the presence of a misdemeanor conviction and an arrest, as these indicate a propensity for problematic behavior. The correct answer is C. Review the applicant's record to determine if the misdemeanor conviction or the arrest for simple battery are specifically listed as disqualifying offenses under Nevada revised statutes concerning concealed firearm permits, and proceed based on that statutory determination. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between an individual's right to self-defense and the strict legal requirements for carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying Nevada revised statutes, NRS, concerning concealed firearm permits, specifically when an applicant's past conduct might raise questions about their suitability. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are based on established legal standards and not on personal bias or incomplete information. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, focusing on convictions that are disqualifying under NRS 202-360. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the statutory framework established by the Nevada legislature for determining eligibility for a concealed firearm permit. By meticulously examining the nature and disposition of any past offenses against the specific disqualifiers outlined in the law, an applicant's eligibility can be objectively assessed. This ensures that the permitting process is conducted in a manner that upholds public safety while respecting individual rights, as mandated by Nevada law. An incorrect approach would be to deny a permit solely based on an arrest without a conviction, or on a conviction for a misdemeanor that is not listed as a disqualifier in NRS 202. 360. Such actions would represent a failure to follow the specific statutory requirements for disqualification. Denying a permit based on an arrest alone is legally unsound, as Nevada law focuses on convictions for disqualifying offenses. Similarly, disregarding the specific list of disqualifying misdemeanors in the statute and denying a permit based on a non-disqualifying offense would be an arbitrary and unlawful application of the law. Another incorrect approach would be to grant a permit to an individual with a disqualifying conviction, such as a felony conviction, without proper review or consideration of the statutory prohibitions. This would directly violate NRS 202. 360 and compromise public safety. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes strict adherence to the Nevada revised statutes governing concealed firearm permits. This involves a systematic review of all submitted documentation, a diligent investigation into any relevant criminal history, and a clear understanding of which offenses, by conviction, render an applicant ineligible. When in doubt about the interpretation of a specific statute or the implications of a particular conviction, consulting legal counsel or seeking guidance from the Nevada Department of Public Safety is a prudent step to ensure lawful and ethical decision-making. Question 19. Comparative studies suggest that individuals often have personal preferences regarding the firearms they carry for self-defense. If a Nevada resident possesses a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit and is proficient with a specific type of handgun, but that particular handgun is not explicitly listed as permissible for concealed carry under Nevada law, what is the legally compliant course of action? Option A. Carry the handgun for which the individual has a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit, ensuring it is concealed and the permit is carried. Option B. Carry a different firearm that is explicitly recognized as permissible for concealed carry under Nevada law, even if it is not the individual's preferred choice. Option C. Carry the handgun without a permit, as personal proficiency with a firearm is sufficient justification for carrying it concealed in Nevada. Option D. Carry the handgun the individual is most proficient with, assuming personal proficiency overrides specific firearm restrictions for concealed carry. The correct answer is A. Carry the handgun for which the individual has a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit, ensuring it is concealed and the permit is carried. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their right to self-defense with strict adherence to Nevada law regarding the carrying of concealed firearms. The individual's personal belief about the effectiveness of a particular firearm is secondary to the legal requirements for carrying a concealed weapon. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with NRS 202. 360, which outlines the conditions for obtaining and maintaining a concealed firearm permit. The best professional approach involves understanding and strictly adhering to the legal requirements for carrying a concealed firearm in Nevada. This means ensuring that the firearm being carried is one that is permitted under the terms of the concealed firearm permit, regardless of personal preference or perceived effectiveness. The individual must possess a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit and carry a firearm that is legally permissible to carry under that permit. This approach prioritizes legal compliance and public safety, which are paramount when exercising the right to carry a concealed firearm. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any firearm the individual is proficient with is automatically permissible to carry concealed, even if it doesn't meet specific legal criteria or if the permit has restrictions. This disregards the legal framework established by Nevada law, which may specify types of firearms or conditions under which they can be carried concealed. Another incorrect approach would be to carry a firearm without a valid Nevada concealed firearm permit, or to carry a firearm that is explicitly prohibited by Nevada law, such as certain automatic weapons or firearms with modifications that render them illegal. These approaches demonstrate a lack of understanding of or disregard for the law, leading to potential legal consequences and compromising public safety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable Nevada revised statutes, NRS, pertaining to concealed firearms. This includes familiarizing oneself with the requirements for obtaining and maintaining a permit, as well as understanding which types of firearms are permissible to carry concealed. Before carrying any firearm, an individual should verify that they possess a valid permit and that the specific firearm they intend to carry complies with all legal stipulations. If there is any doubt, seeking clarification from the Nevada Department of Public Safety or legal counsel is the prudent course of action. Question 20. The investigation demonstrates that a Nevada concealed firearm permit holder observed an individual exhibiting erratic behavior in a public park. The individual was pacing, speaking loudly to themselves, and occasionally gesturing aggressively towards unseen persons. The permit holder, legally carrying a concealed firearm, considered their options. If the permit holder's total time spent observing the individual from a safe distance was 15 minutes, and they decided to contact law enforcement after observing for 10 minutes, what percentage of their observation time was spent before contacting law enforcement? Option A, 67%. Option B, 33%. Option C, 50%. Option D, 100%. The correct answer is A, 67%. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a permit holder's actions, while not explicitly illegal at the moment, raise significant ethical concerns regarding responsible firearm ownership and the spirit of Nevada's concealed firearm laws. The challenge lies in balancing the legal right to carry with the ethical obligation to act with prudence and avoid creating unnecessary alarm or potential for escalation. The core ethical dilemma is whether a permit holder, even if legally permitted to carry, should engage in actions that could be perceived as confrontational or unnecessarily provocative, especially when the perceived threat is ambiguous. The best approach involves prioritizing de-escalation and responsible observation without direct engagement. This approach is correct because Nevada law, while granting the right to carry a concealed firearm to qualified individuals, also implicitly emphasizes responsible and lawful conduct. Ethical firearm ownership extends beyond mere legal compliance to include a duty of care to oneself and the public. By observing from a safe distance and contacting law enforcement if a genuine threat materializes, the permit holder upholds the principles of responsible gun ownership, minimizes the risk of accidental escalation, and avoids placing themselves or others in undue danger. This aligns with the ethical imperative to act with restraint and good judgment when armed. An incorrect approach involves directly confronting the individual. This is ethically unacceptable because it bypasses established law enforcement channels and introduces a significant risk of misinterpretation, escalation, and potential violence. The permit holder, lacking the authority and training of a law enforcement officer, could misjudge the situation, leading to an unjustified use of force or a dangerous confrontation. This violates the ethical principle of using force only as a last resort and when absolutely necessary for self-defense or the defense of others, and it undermines the public trust in responsible permit holders. Another incorrect approach involves immediately drawing the firearm. This is a severe ethical and legal misstep. Drawing a firearm should be a response to an immediate, unavoidable threat to life or serious bodily harm. Drawing it in a situation of uncertainty, without clear evidence of imminent danger, is an excessive and dangerous reaction. It escalates the situation dramatically, potentially provoking the very threat the permit holder is trying to avoid, and could lead to legal repercussions if deemed an unjustified display of a weapon. A final incorrect approach involves ignoring the situation entirely without any form of responsible observation or reporting. While avoiding direct confrontation is wise, complete inaction, even if the individual is not perceived as an immediate threat, can be ethically problematic if the circumstances suggest a potential for future harm, or if the individual's behavior is genuinely disruptive or concerning to public safety. Responsible permit holders have a degree of civic duty to be aware of their surroundings and report suspicious activity that could pose a risk without putting themselves in harm's way. The professional reasoning process for a permit holder in such a situation should involve a rapid assessment of the threat level, prioritizing personal safety and de-escalation. This includes asking, is there an immediate and credible threat to life or serious bodily harm? What are the safest options for observation and reporting? Is direct engagement necessary or advisable? The decision-making framework should always lean towards caution, relying on law enforcement for intervention when a situation moves beyond simple observation to a clear and present danger.